team need to do on offense to get something going here?
We need to change the whole entire game plan at halftime.
Okay, what do you need to change about the game plan? What are you frustrated about?
There's just a lot going on right out now. It's embarrassing for us here as an offense, so a lot of things we want to fix and correct.
Thanks.
Wow. Change the entire offensive game plan. And these are short half times. 10 minutes on the clock.
It ain't over.
Better go burn some chalk.
Welcome one and all to another edition of Football for All, as I am your host, Zach Kyleman. You just heard the now infamous sideline interview from New York Guardians quarterback Matt McGloin from Week 2 that did hit virally on the internet's waves. It was quite a astonishing interview, and it's one of the first marquee events for the XFL interview process. We'll get to more of that later on in the podcast. I am going to have David Taylor of another XFL Fan Network associate of ours with us on later on in this podcast, and we will touch on that, Seattle, and much more, including our own picks, by the way. So stay tuned if you are starting from the beginning here. But I just want to get a few things first that I want to touch on before we go and talk to David. Some things I noticed in XFL's Week 2. So play is still being polished. Among the 4 games that I watched all 4 of them this week. Week 1, I actually did not watch all of them, mainly because I was just unable to access a television for the then Guardians and Vipers game. So this week, I was able to access a television for all 4, and I will tell you, it was rough this week. It seemed a little rougher than last, and definitely there is still some polishing to be done. Now, it has an asterisk by it, I will say, for a few reasons. One reason, one of the games had 2 starting quarterbacks coming back from injury. That would be the Dallas Renegades visiting the Los Angeles Wildcats. You did see Landry Jones and Josh Johnson finally getting starts for their respected teams. They were shaking off the rust. However, there were flashes of what we could expect to see from these guys. Landry Jones was an established NFL quarterback that was on a backup duty role for the Pittsburgh Steelers for some time, and he did make some decent plays at the time for the Steelers. He knocks off some rust. He's with his former head coach, Bob Stoops. He's going to get some more chances to impress. I think that Week 3, we're going to see plenty more from him when they go to take on the Seattle Dragons. As for Josh Johnson, again, similar scenario. Coming from injury, had a thigh injury apparently coming in, and was healthy for this game, surprisingly actually, and showed flashes from what we could see. He had a really nice 2 touchdown passes to Nelson Spruce that I was pretty impressed with, but there were some moments that he did miss the mark. And again, this is shaking off the rust, but a lot more promise for Josh Johnson, I think, coming into Week 3, even with the LA defense and offense, too, of course, having some bumps and bruises or just having some general questions anyway. But there is some positive still to take from, of course, Week 2. There were some good games. I mean, think about it. The St. Louis Battlehawks Houston Roughnecks contest, that was the final game of the weekend on FS1. Fantastic game, and an ideal XFL game, if I must say, for the league. You want to see more games like this that have high-flying action and content that would make you want to stay and keep your eyeballs glued. You also want to see high-quality football. That is what we got. We got a game that we saw the Battlehawks start out early and fast. The Roughnecks then looked like they had knocked the Battlehawks out of any chance of taking this game and getting a W from it. And here come the Battlehawks again, and what do you know, midway through the 4th quarter, it's a 3-point game, and one interception that crucially is taken for the Roughnecks turns into a win. So it's exactly the type of game you want. You want to see stars come out like P.J. Walker and Cam Phillips, or Jordan Ta'amu, or Matt Jones, or Jazz Ferguson. You want to see guys like that come out in these games and shine. Very much so in these contests. That is an ideal XFL game. I think another one, in my opinion, actually was, in the 4th quarter at least, the Dallas Renegades versus the Wildcats contest, because you did see a lot of offense in that final quarter. That is an ideal XFL game if you're condensing it to one quarter. And again, this is early on. This is a typical issue that spring leagues or new football leagues have to have gone over the hump. They always have to get over team chemistry. Team chemistry is built much better in-game than it is just on a practice field or preseason games. So we should expect more for Week 3. I think we're going to see better play in Week 3 than we did in Week 2. And I think we are going to also see an increase in attendance, by the way, which, of course, the Seattle part of this equation I will get to with David here. But in the case of the other 3 teams this week, so we saw some dips, okay. Yes, DC lost to roughly 2,000 fans for their home contest this week, week over week. Houston lost about 800. Even though they did open the second deck, that was a late decision by the Roughnecks, and it did prove to show that they still had a nice turnout, personally. And not a lot, but I would say some outlets did not like how LA was not able to field a majority of the stadium, or at least in their eyes, majority of the stadium at kickoff. Here's the deal. They sold roughly 15,000 tickets for a home opener. It's in Los Angeles. If you don't know the Los Angeles sports market, it's pretty crowded, and it's pretty hard to break through. This was always going to be the XFL's weakest market, and if you didn't understand that from the beginning, then you don't know what has been going on with football in LA. I mean, the LA Chargers had trouble in that stadium. That's an NFL team, and most of their tickets were sold to opposing fans. Not ideal, not what they want. They get money for it, but doesn't show good for a potential, soon-to-be move to SoFi Stadium come this fall. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't look good for the Chargers. Now, for the Wildcats, again, this is a spring league. The fact that they got 15,000 people out there, to me, says, hey, dang, they have some fans out here in Los Angeles. Because seriously, if you look at the social media marks for this team, they're some of the lowest in the league. And it's because LA has so much to do. You have so many things you can do in Los Angeles. It's hard to push through that market. That market, along with New York, like many others have stated before, that was a TV market. They put a team there to get the TV market. That's why they have it. That's why it's there. 15,000 fans in the stands for that game, perfectly fine, if you ask me. I had no problem with that, and I had no issue with the other ones too. And again, this comes down to reporting of the league. Majority-wise, there are many positive outlets, or at least outlets that try to see the XFL at face value. Certain ones I have issue with, in particular, Pro Football Talk. What do you do in Pro Football Talk? I get it. You are owned by NBC. The original XFL run burned NBC for $70 million, at least, they spent with the WWE at the time. And what is this? Is that a spite? Is this what this is? I don't know. That's my theory, is that this is just some sort of spite writings that these guys have. Because, you could report it more accurately. I'm not joking. I mean, Touchdown Wire, which, if I'm correct, is owned by USA Today, they reported something similar along the lines of XFL ratings. Pro Football Talk's been reporting on ratings as in, there was a drop. And there was a drop in ratings. But to be fair, they were always going to have a drop in ratings. This was always going to happen with this league. It was always going to be a drop because, simply put it, you shouldn't have expected anything less. The XFL was the shiny new thing in the room for week 1. You aren't going to expect everybody to stay around, especially not as many casual fans, I would say, those in particular that are NFL diehards. A lot of people are going to be curious. They want to see what this is before they tie their wagon to it. And of course, there's going to be a dip. Not to mention that FS1 is a cable network that has been struggling for ratings behind ESPN. However, those ratings are actually really good. To put this in perspective, FS1, they garnered roughly 1.3 million people for the Battlehawks versus Houston Roughnecks contest, which, if you consider the fact that FS1 almost never gets 1 million viewers for anything, that's insanely impressive. FS1 is supposed to be a direct competitor to ESPN, and they've lagged behind ESPN for years. This is a nice feature for the league, is to have something that they can help boost ratings. Because here's the thing, Fox is going to love it, because FS1 getting a boost in ratings like this means advertisers are going to love it too. You're a TV broadcast company. You're going to want advertisers on your stuff. That's exactly what you want to see. Now, again, this isn't all sunshine and rainbows, because week 3 is going to have to prove that these numbers are going to be the consistent possible numbers, or maybe more. And this week, in particular, is going to have one less broadcast game and going to have one more cable game. Now, ESPN did have decent numbers with their week 1 cable game. I'm curious to see what these numbers are going to be for week 3. Again, we'll find out, of course. Joining me now on the Football for All podcast hotline is Fan Network's very own David Taylor. If you don't know who David Taylor is, he's one that's very popular for the pick segment that we have on the Fan Network, especially for XFL Fan Zone, and is a great contributor for especially Seattle XFL content. David, how have things been for you? I know Seattle's XFL has really been quite popping lately on the league's newswire.
Yeah, things are going really well. I'm excited that they got their first win over the weekend. Another home game coming up this weekend, so keep that momentum going. It's looking pretty good for the Dragon Nation right now.
And might as well keep the conversation up for the Dragon Nation, as you mentioned, or for those that are breathing fire. So week 2, we saw the home opener, 29,000 and change, some writing 30,000 to round that out. Pretty impressive numbers, to say the least. And then today, as of this podcast recording, we hear 10,000 season ticket holders for the league. I mean, should we keep expecting increasing demand? I mean, it's just amazing to see Seattle as a market that embraces the XFL. I mean, I know they're very passionate fans of the Seahawks and as well of the new NHL expansion coming, but I mean, what do you think of all this? I think it's really exciting for the town. I think the fact that they currently don't have an NBA team probably helps quite a bit. I think if the Sonics were there or something like that, back in the day, then it might not be quite the same turnout for this. But I think it's a blessing for the city. It's great for XFL, because that big turnout obviously helps everybody. As the saying goes, like the tide raises all ships, I guess, or whatever. So I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I think that as long as they keep winning, they'll keep or at least playing good football. The fans will keep turning out. That is very true. Actually, I want to ask you about the team itself. Now, Brandon Silvers, I will say, been a bit rocky. Through the first 2 weeks. Do you think he is the staying answer for the Dragons, or do you think they should switch over to BJ Daniels at some point?
I don't know. I would love to see Daniels come in for at least a series in this next game and just see what happens. One thing I've noticed throughout the entire XFL is, the teams that are doing the best and are being consistently successful here at the start are teams that have a little bit of a mobile quarterback. A quarterback that can get 2 or 3 first downs a game with his legs. And so Silvers currently, especially with the ankle injury that he had from week 1, is not necessarily the guy that's going to do that on a regular basis. So I definitely would love to see the other guy come in for at least a series, Daniels. But in the long run, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Seattle has right now a lot of injuries. They don't have a great look at wide receiver because a lot of guys are hurt, and so a lot of that kind of goes into these factors. And maybe Jim Zorn is maybe waiting to get some guys back before he really starts to make some changes.
That's fair enough. And yes, Seattle, I do understand, has a lot of front line injuries too, if I am well aware. One particular thing you mentioned.
Definitely.
You can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I think that maybe 3 offensive linemen were hurt in the last game or missed at least part of the second game there, which kind of explains a little bit why Silvers didn't have quite as clean a pocket to throw in as he did in the first game. And so, maybe that has something to do with it. I think we need another couple of weeks to be able to really tell what's the deal with Silvers at this point.
Yeah, and I do agree with you on the front line, like you're mentioning, and that's actually something that's very it's becoming a paramount or becoming quite a luxury for some of these XFL teams. We're learning through the first 2 weeks. The same can be said to a degree with quarterback play. Before I jump into this Matt McGloin story that dominated the headlines over the weekend, I'm just going to ask you here, do you think the play improves because chemistry improves next week? I know with some of these new leagues, we have to wait and see on the chemistry for some of the teams. I mean, the Alliance, I would say, took maybe 3 to 4 weeks to get the offenses in line where they were competing truly with the defenses. But do you think this week we truly see more offense that matches to the defensive prowess that the league's showing?
Yeah, I really do. I think, we saw in last week's games, several of those games were tied like 3-3 at halftime or 3-0. And then all of a sudden in the second half, the team started finding the end zone. Like Dallas really found their running game late in the third and fourth quarter of that one. That score, I believe, was maybe 6-3 at halftime or something like that. Really low scoring, and suddenly it was 25-18 at the end of the game, more of like a normal football score, I guess it will be. So, yeah, I definitely think that if it's not this week, it will be the week after that. The teams are finally starting to settle into who is doing what as far as roles go. The quarterback position is getting more settled at most of the ones. Like Houston is doing very well, settled at quarterback. DC, very well, settled at quarterback. The teams that aren't really doing well right now, they're doing quarterback carousel. And so, but I do think that we're going to see more consistent quarterback play, just more consistent offensive plays this weekend. And then going into next with peaking, right around week 5, I think we're going to see what we are really going to get right at the midpoint.
And I think that I agree with you on that. I mean, the XFL, I think going in, even with the 2 months of mini camps or training camp in general, I think this was always going to be a problem for the league, at least to start. Team chemistry does take time. It doesn't just happen over 2 months of practice and then finally we come into live games and all of a sudden people are throwing 4 touchdowns a game every team. Not every team's going to be an all-star. You're going to have some that are lower grade. Unfortunately, Tampa Bay and the likes of New York right now are on that lower end. And speaking of New York City, as we're talking about quarterbacks, this was a topic that really dominated the headlines for the majority of Saturday, really going through the weekend, was just Matt McGloin's sideline interviews, the trio of them when it came from whether it's interceptions or his halftime spat of kind of just critiquing the game plan of the Guardians, and then him being benched. Made a lot of headlines just for a lot of people saw at face value as his character. Later, he would have a USA Today interview where he stated, he has one personality on the field, one off. Now, that interview in particular, we have no idea how that affects him. My question is based on fan reaction of sideline interviews in general, because the press loves it in general, I've seen. I would say the majority of people when it comes to Twitter and Facebook like these, but there's a small and I would say slightly growing faction of fans that take issue with some of these negative interviews. How do you see these interviews, like when it comes to interceptions or missed field goals? Because some people feel they're cruel. A lot of people feel it's more raw and actually true to what the player's going to say.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a balance that needs to be struck there. I do think even on some of the good things, you see a reporter flying in right as the moment's happening. And what am I going to say? I remember in week 1, DC defenders intercept a pass, run it back for a touchdown. And as they're all piling on the guy in the end zone, the reporter is running in to get some sort of a comment from the guy, and she nearly gets trampled by this giant pile of guys or whatever. And so I think that just as the idea, the concept, and the access to the players is a good idea. I think that it's just in early stages, and they need to maybe work on the timing of it a little bit. Maybe not the second after a guy throws an interception, maybe after a commercial break or something like that. Just to let cooler heads maybe prevail a little bit. But maybe that's not what they want. I mean, maybe they want that that he's a moment thing. Although I do think that McGloin might be paying for that this week team wise. Again, that's just me speculating, but there was a picture that was circulated on social media towards the end of the game, McGloin standing far left in the picture, and the rest of the team is far right. And so that sort of told a lot as far as what people were thinking about what he had to say on live TV there, at least with some of the players. So, I do love the idea of the interviews. I don't think they're being executed very well. I think that there needs to be something there that has to change a little bit with it. Maybe set up a few easier questions, run through it once before they actually air it. Mm-hmm. And to say, to maybe vent for a second and then dial it back, because I have to imagine that McGloin would maybe like a couple of those interviews back at this point in the week.
Yeah, I think he would definitely like a few of them back. I do like them overall, and I'm kind of in the similar line as you, where it has to be situational, I think. And the broadcast teams are learning as they go what works best for these guys. I mean, right after the interception, what are you going to say? I mean, if we're going to talk about a more calm and kind of copy and paste response, we can go and look at Landry Jones over when they were playing in Los Angeles on Sunday. Twice he had interceptions, and twice they would go over and interview him. He said, "Yeah, it was just a bad play. I guess got to play better." And he said it both at the same time, and I'm sitting here on the couch going, "Oh, this is pretty generic," But other interviews, you get great ones like, and I'm forgetting the names, and I'm getting better at the roster names. But you have a sideline interview where you have, I believe it's one of the Renegades linebackers. He's trying to stretch out, and you have an interviewee sitting on the sideline, laying down with him, trying to get this interview. That adds a little character to the broadcast to me. So that situation's great, and you get more personal interviews like that. Same goes for the Pat McAfee Week 1 interview after Marquise King's punt gets pushed into the end zone. Excellent interview, and it's a good situation. But yeah, I mean, this to me, I have to say with you, it's a growing pain thing for the league. And they're going to have to adjust through it, especially broadcasters, especially if they want to continue with the XFL after this year, which personally I think with the ratings we've seen, and I don't know if you agree with me, I'll let you respond to this, but the ratings, at least week 2 wise, we expected a drop. They weren't bad. They were not bad. I don't know if you see the same, but I didn't think they were bad.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I saw lots of different stats online about that this week. They're outpacing what a typical sports program is, like on FS1, for example. That one had over 1 million viewers, and I saw one tweet where FS1 is averaging like maybe 300,000 on a typical like sporting event that would be happening at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it's almost triple what would normally be airing that time. So those people have got to be happy for it. The producers on that broadcast have got to be very excited, and the sponsors for the commercials and things like that are saying, "Wow, that's triple the audience that's normally on that Sunday night." So yeah, let's throw some money at that. So I was encouraged by, we saw a lot of headlines that were sort of like misleading or shocking, with like significant drop and alarming and some like buzzwords like that, just to get people to click on the articles. But overall, I still think it was very positive. A good turnout. Stadium attendance increased. Viewership dropped a little bit, but we had NBA All-Star Weekend, had Daytona 500. Lots of things happening in a weekend that made sense for it to take a little bit of a dip.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to happen. The XFL last week was the shiny new object, so we were going to expect some decent ratings, which the 3.3 average, 3.3 million, I mean, that was pretty good. And it definitely stood out. That's why people reported it very well. Fox was very happy about it. ABC was happy about it. And now we see it averaging, with the exception of FS1, which we should expect to be below 2 million just for how much they struggle, 2.2, 2.3 million. And that's acceptable. That's an acceptable rating for what this time of year is. And like you said, all these other sporting events are going to crowd out the market. I mean, everyone's going to get even more antsy and on it when it comes to March Madness, which happened the same thing to the Alliance last year, because March Madness was the big looming sporting event that everybody was worried would kill the league in ratings, which honestly the TV deal for the Alliance killed the ratings, not the sporting events. Let's be fair. And you brought up something that I get peeved at. Reporting for this league, for some of these articles, I think people just like to spite people. So one in particular, I I've officially lost a lot of respect for Pro Football Talk the last 2 weeks for some of their writings. I don't know if it's NBC being scorned by the fact that the new XFL didn't use them, or that they had the 01 iteration fail so badly that they just can't stand the sight of the league being back up again. But I'll give you an example of 2 different writings of the ratings this week. So here we have Pro Football Talk. Here's their headline: XFL ratings dip ABC in week 2. So it's just an expected, slightly negative article. Here's one that's an article headline that's more realistic: Week 2 XFL ratings dip, but numbers are comparatively strong. And that's from Touchdown Wire, which I believe is a USA Today property as well. And it's just like a common, I don't know, it's just a common thing that kind of bugs me. And I feel you're getting the same vibe for some people, like Pro Football Talk. SI Today, for crying out loud, doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I definitely think there's some sort of a little bit of an agenda or something behind that, because the ratings, they dropped, but they still were, very impressive for what they needed to be for the weekend. And that's really the story is, okay, they dropped, but are they still good?
Right.
If they would have dropped to like 100,000 viewers or something like that, then okay, yeah, put your headline out with the alarming whatever. But yeah, it does really seem like, especially from some of the Pro Football Talk headlines, it seemed like they had another one earlier this week about the quarterback play or something like that, and just how the league was doomed or something. And it really seems like sour grapes or something with that. And that's, I don't know. That I don't even want to read articles like that.
yeah, and I'm honestly starting to get pushed away from doing this, because it just is. I don't know why I like to do frustrating article reads like this, but maybe I'm just a masochist with how I do this, because I'm like, oh boy, let's see how I'll get hurt today reading how the XFL is going to fail. I mean, and it's a looming thing, because it does sting, and we're passionate because it's a league we want to survive. Spring football's had a bad past, but we want to see this thrive. We like this a lot. So I guess maybe that's why I read it, is because I want to see why, or want to understand why people write these articles. But it's probably it's a process that's not worth my fruits of labor, but it's something we have to bring up because, well, Pro Football and some other article places have agendas right now that are affecting the league. Week 3 is on the horizon, and I was going to do this with you. You, of course, write a very popular Pick'em article for us at XFL Fan Zone, and I might as well thought, just let's get ahead of this thing, at least for you and me.
All right, sounds good.
We got 4 games on the slate. Saturday's slate, we have Roughnecks versus Vipers at 2:00, Renegades versus your Dragons at 5, and then Sunday we have the Guardians taking on the Battlehawks for the home opener at the Dome of America Center. That's at 3. And then the ending nightcap will be the Defenders taking on the Wildcats. Saturday's games, who do you got for those 2?
Okay, so the Vipers home opener, I think, is going to be really well attended, and I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be probably really nice weather, and I think that's probably going to be the only positives for the Tampa Bay side of things, unfortunately. So I definitely think that Houston is just too settled right now. They're too far ahead of the rest of the league, especially Tampa with their quarterback carousel. Definitely Roughnecks in that one by probably 2 touchdowns. And then the night one actually I think is really interesting, because I was looking at the points for, points against, and kind of doing some numbers with that, and I actually think this one's going to be really close, within maybe 1 or 2 points to even that we might see the first overtime game this weekend with Dallas and Seattle. And so, which could be really exciting. I am, and because of that, because it might go to overtime, because of how close their average scores are defensively and offensively, I'm going to take Seattle because of the home crowd in that one, by maybe 2 points. Maybe they get 3 of the 5 overtime scores, and the other team, Dallas, gets only maybe 2 of them or something like that.
Hey, quite a
so I'm excited. Yeah, hoping for that to happen.
Well, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to see the overtime be implemented at some point. Just to get the vibe of that hockey shootout style. Who knows? Maybe we'll finally get more 3-point attempts that we have been rarely seeing as this league has gone on. just maybe so we can avoid that overtime or see better plays. I know you are adamantly not a fan of how some of these coaches call the three-pointers or how they don't call them in particular.
I'm not. No, I'm very much. I don't understand the ups. I mean, it's literally triple the points from a one-pointer if you get it, and the one-pointers just aren't happening. They're happening at less than 50%, I think, and so if you got a less than 50% chance to get one, but just go for three. You've got more room to operate. A mobile quarterback can move around a little bit, maybe even run it in from 10 yards out if the defense breaks down in some way. I don't know. I would go for three every time, I think, especially early on.
That's what we call a gambling man, David.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I think that it's too exciting. I mean, it's supposed to be football reimagined. So let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's go for three. Let's make something. Let's do some double forward passes. Let's do some XFL things.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Gotta give props to Pep Hamilton for at least pushing that forward right now.
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, he definitely seems to be leading the league in terms of XFL style plays, if you ask me. But anyway, didn't mean to track you off that way. But real quick, my Saturday picks. I'm going to do Roughnecks for the early game, and I actually will. I'm going to go with Renegades against you on this one. The Roughnecks, it's pretty simple. Tampa Bay is just a hot mess right now, and I don't know if Mark Trestman is just the wrong answer, which he might be. I mean, I'm a Bears fan, so we got burned by him pretty bad for 2 years.
Oh yeah.
But. So yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna go, yeah. My wife's a Bears fan. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I know all about that.
She understands. She understands very well.
She really does.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Roughnecks maybe a 17-point victory. They're just such a well-rounded unit out there in Houston. As for the Dallas and Seattle game, this is intriguing, and I mainly put it because how much does Landry Jones improve week over week now that he has the rust knocked off of him? And now that he should have a full week of practice, because we understood that last week he only had about 3 days of full practice before he played Los Angeles. So it all depends, I think, on Landry Jones. I think he actually does take the leap next week. I'm going to say that it is a touchdown score. I want an overtime game really badly. Don't get me wrong, and I would love your prediction to happen in particular. I think that Dallas does. It's a close game, but I think they overcome some early issues. And in particular, I think they learned their lesson last week that they have a good running game. Just lean on the running game. Cameron Artis-Payne is a legitimate good running back. He had some starts in Carolina in the NFL. Give him some touches. And I think that's what's going to be one of the deciding factors, along with Landry Jones having a full week of practice. Moving on to the Sunday games. Who are you looking at, David? Okay, Sunday games. So St. Louis is going to win their game, no question. The Dome is going to be rocking. It's going to be an incredibly difficult place to play. New York they're not ready. I don't think. They had a bad week last week. They probably had a bad week of practice. You can imagine some chemistry stuff happening there. I think St. Louis is going to maybe win by a couple of touchdowns. I think the home crowd. Just the excitement that they have going forward. They could very easily be 2-0 as well right now. And so, I definitely see St. Louis taking that one. No question, no doubt in my mind for the Battlehawks on that one. Nightcap game, I think it's going to be D.C., and I think it's going to be D.C. by a lot because, Los Angeles has given up a lot of points and has given up a lot of yards through the air, and the defenders right now are, they're on a collision course with Houston for their best team in the league. So I really think it's defenders in the last game of the night. I'm actually on the same line as you with these two picks. Not DC. New York versus St. Louis. I definitely have St. Louis as long as New York keeps being their mess that they were from last week. I'm also just excited, and I keep touting this on social media. I just can't wait to go to the home opener here. I am going on Sunday, so I'm excited. I'm gonna meet up with Scott actually at the game. So, nice. Yeah, so great. Yeah, it's gonna be a blast. I can't wait for it, and bringing along the father here to check out some XFL football, win him over, get another fan, if you know what I mean. Sounds great. Yep. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna see it maybe 10-point victory here for the Battlehawks. Ta'amu is kind of an underlying good quarterback story for the XFL right now, just because P.J. Walker and Cardell Jones have been just as spectacular, if not more. But he's been dominant to another level on accuracy and touchdowns. I also do like the running game when you have Christian Michael and Matt Jones behind the line. As for the defenders and Wildcats, yeah, defenders are going to win this too. Josh Johnson does improve that offense in L.A., don't get me wrong. But your point in particular, Winston Moss sitting on the bench with his arms stretched out does not help the defense in any way, shape, or form. I cracked up so much when I saw him last week. They're trying to talk to him, and he's just like he's lounged out so hard on the bench. And then as soon as they get him on the mic, he's like, "Oh my!" He gets back up and starts acting like a normal coach. Well, my defense is.
That was crazy.
He's something else, man.
I loved it.
He's something else. But yeah, I got DC in that game, and it looks like I love tracking the ticket sales. Looks like LA is going to hopefully match their tickets from last week, which I was kind of impressed because LA is the weakest market in the XFL, for being honest. So. It is looking nice out there. It's going to be a good week for tickets, I think, too. David, where can we find you, man? I know you're on a few platforms in particular. I know your Twitter's pretty active, but where do you want us to find you at?
Yeah, mostly on Twitter. FaithFootball52 is my handle there. I write for XFL Fan Zone. Write a little bit for PrimetimeSportsTalk.com. Do some XFL articles over there. That's basically where I am. I have a XFL photos account on Instagram that I did. I was able to take some pretty good pictures in that first game of the season, so I've been sharing those on there a little bit. Yeah, I'm around.
All right, David. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you. Hopefully, we can have you on here later on in the season, and hopefully, we'll have more excellent stories to talk about with the XFL.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. So, ladies and gents, that's going to do it for this edition of Football for All. A special thank you goes out to David Taylor for joining me on this edition of the podcast. Please be sure to follow him and check out all of his content that he does create. Be sure to watch out also for Week 3 that is going to be coming up next week. I will have some audio from the game that I am going to try and record, as I will be at the home opener for the St. Louis Battlehawks. It is going to be rocking at the Dome of America Center. I am looking forward to this. Going to bring the pop along, and by that I mean Dad along with me, and we're going to have a hell of a time out in St. Louis, Missouri. It's going to be a blast. I am looking forward to this, and it's going to be one historic moment for sure for the league. If you want to keep up with me and the podcast, you got several ways to do that. For any future episodes, of course, be sure to check us out on any platform, specifically Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to follow social platforms, well, Twitter is my primary place. You can follow either at Zach Kyleman for my personal Twitter. You can also follow the podcast's Twitter at ZK Podcast. You can also find the Football for All podcast on Facebook at ZK Podcast. You can also find it on Instagram at ZK Podcast. And you can also go to the YouTube if you want to find extra content or the podcast episodes. Look up Football for All. Until next time, guys, I'm Zach Kyleman saying thank you once more for the support as always. So long and stay tuned.